Hello Simmers and welcome back to X-Plane 11, where as you can see I am sitting in a helicopter today. The reason for that is I did a lot of videos already on fixed wing airplanes, and well, I thought it was getting kind of boring doing all the A to B flights. So I thought it was time for a new challenge for myself and some fun for you guys, so I decided to give helicopters a try in this sim. X-Plane 11 is said to be one of the most realistic simulators to fly helicopters in. So I thought, well, what the hell, let's just give it a go. I haven't flown them ever before, so this is not a series of me telling you how to fly them. This is just, well, some amusement of showing you how I feel in trying to fly them. I think that would be rather fun for a change. What I did do, however, was read some articles about helicopters, and one that I found very helpful in particular was the one on helisimmer.com. I will include the link in the description below. And basically, they wrote a series of articles about the very basics of helicopters, and they're very clear, they're not too long, and it's just, well, I thought they were quite helpful in at least understanding the basics of helicopter flying. So if you, just like myself, were like, well, I might want to try flying helicopters someday, but I don't know anything about them, this is a good place to start. So I will include the link in the description of the video below. So if we jump back into the flight deck of this helicopter, the first thing that we have to take a look at are the controls of the helicopter. Of course, we have the stick in front of us that's called the cyclic controls, and that will make you go forward, backward, left, or right. Easy as that, and I've set a joystick in front of me, which give me exactly those controls. Then we have the rudders or the anti-torque pedals, and they are assigned to my rudder pedals. So there's no problem in there as well. But then there's one vital control, which is the collective, which is down here. And for the collective, we need to assign an axis. And well, I did look up some special helicopter control sets on the internet, but I only came out with sets that were well over $1,000, which is well just a little bit out of my budget. So we have to improvise something. So the first thing that I'm going to do is in the settings menu at the joystick settings, I'm going to create a new profile for helicopters because that's one of the good things of X-Plane 11. It allows you to make a certain amount of profiles, or basically as many profiles as you like, for different kinds of airplanes. For instance, I have a profile for general aviation, which for instance on the throttle quadrant gives me throttle, prop and mixture control. Well, I also made twin airplane control setup, which gives me throttle 1 and throttle 2 on my throttle quadrant. And that one is flown with the yoke. I also set up an Airbus control profile where the yoke doesn't do anything, but I have assigned the functions of the yoke to my joystick because I have the Logitech Attack 3. That's quite an old joystick, but it's very nice for a side stick operation in an Airbus. So I decided to assign roll and pitch to the side stick. And in that same profile, I have throttle 1 and throttle 2 on my throttle quadrant. And now I want to make something similar, but specifically for helicopters. So you go to Manage Profiles, and you press plus, Create New Profile. And I call that Profile Helicopter. Done. Now, when I go back to Manage Profiles, I can assign this profile to a specific airplane. So if I move it down here to the helicopter, I'll use the Profile Helicopter. Done. But now I have to set up my controls for my helicopter profile, which is roll and pitch to the stick, which will be my cyclic, which is yaw assigned to my pedals. But now in my throttle quadrant, and I have to check that the yoke doesn't have anything except for, well, panning the fuse basically. But on my throttle quadrant, I want to do things slightly different. I want to use this one for my collective, and I want to use, I think I'm gonna go for the number 3 for my throttle, and I don't want to do anything with that one. Because on the collective, which is down here, so let's just check whether this works. Here we go. Very nice. Because on some helicopters on the collective there's also throttle controls, and I will get back to that later. But it's a separate control on the collective. So because I don't have a real life helicopter control set, I just have to assign another axis on my throttle quadrant for that throttle control. So that's setting up the basics, the controls, and assigning them to the airplanes. And I can only recommend you to go with that. It's something that you can also use very well if you decide not to fly helicopters, but you fly a lot of different types of airplanes, like I do, like Airbus, Boeings, Cessnas, Pipers, you name it, general aviation, and the heavy metal stuff. It's very easy, and I think it's one of the nicest features in X-Plane 11 that you can set up a lot of profiles, assign the profiles to a type of airplane. So when you select the airplane, the profiles are configured to your liking automatically. So we are at Massa Cinquale, which is in northern Italy, basically on the edge of Tuscany. I ended there yesterday with a flight using the Piper Arrow, so we're somewhere in this region. And the reason why I started in here is because, well, there's a lot of space and it has 2 helicopter platforms. As it turns out, this is the home base for the Tuscany Air Ambulance service. And what is very convenient for me is that, well, there's not a lot of build-up stuff surrounding it, so I have some space to move this helicopter when it's running out of my controls, which it probably will. So enough for the chit chat. Let's just fire up the helicopter, and once I have done that, I'll be back with you and we'll start to go over some of the basics. So see you in a bit. So here we are again. I just started up the helicopter, which is basically done by switching on the electric systems in here, and then open these ones in here and add in a little bit of throttle, and these are the starters. Switched on the lights, so let's switch on the landing lights. Strobe lights are on. We don't need logo lights. The emergency lights, they are armed. And let's just see, is there anything else that we need to do here? No, this looks all right. Okay, so first thing, flying helicopters. Well, as I showed you a couple of minutes ago with setting up the controls, these are the controls of the airplane, but what do they actually do? Like I mentioned, the cyclic that controls basically the movement of the airplane horizontally, so you can fly forward or backward or left or right. And what is most important in this stage of the flight is the collective, because the collective controls, as far as I understood it, the pitch of the blades. So you have these main rotor up here, and with the collective you can change the pitch at which the blades touch the air basically, and when the pitch increases, so does the lift, and that will actually lift up the helicopter. But when the pitch increases on the blades, so does the drag of the blades. And because the blades create more drag, the RPM is likely to drop. And that's why you need more RPM when you start to raise the collective. And the reason how you can do that is by adding in a little bit of throttle. Some helicopters, well, from what I've read, have what they call, I thought it was a governor function or something like that, which basically makes sure that as a pilot you only have to focus on your inputs in the collective and the cyclic, and the computer will then automatically increase or decrease throttle to keep the RPM at the same level throughout the phases of flight. I'm not really sure whether this one has that, so we'll just have to find out. But it's important to know that in some helicopters, when you raise the collective, because of the increased pitch angle of the blades, the drag increases, so you need to add in throttle to keep your engine RPM at the same level. But when we increase throttle, that will also increase the torque. And that torque makes the fuselage of the helicopter turn in the opposite direction as the rotor blades turn. So we have to compensate for that using the anti-torque pedals. So let's just start by trying to lift this one off the ground by adding in a little bit of collective. And why do I have a master caution light? Yaw damper and brakes. So where's my yaw damper? Let's see, blah blah blah, stick trim, that's not what we need. Well, it doesn't seem like I can control this. Let's see, what do we have here? Windshield wipers, pito heat. Well, can't really hurt switching them on. Don't need anti-ice, master start, taxi lights. Well, I can't figure out where that one is this instantly, but let's just release the parking brake. And like I said, start adding in a little bit of collective, and small movements is key because it's a very delicate balance of forces, and if you start to increase power too fast, that will have an effect. So let's just gently move it up until we get a result on the airplane, on the helicopter, seeing it lifting up. I don't think it's doing anything because there's too little throttle in here. So let's increase the throttle first. Increase the engine RPM. That's more like it. We see the RPM increasing. Make sure that it stays out of the yellow, I guess. And now increase the collective a little bit. And now you see that the torque is moving up because the collective is moving upwards. Here we go. Now the fuselage has a tendency to yaw to the left. So what I'll do is try to compensate that. Here we go. And we're actually somewhat flying right now. So let's just increase RPM and gently move the cyclic a little bit forward. Try to gain some forward speed. Not too much. Try to climb out easily. I think I need to set up my track IR when flying helicopters, because the downside of the Logitech Wingman 3 joystick is that it doesn't have a view pen button on top of it. And since I have one hand at the collective and throttle and one hand at the cyclic, there's no room for me to, or no free hand to use the mouse to pan around. So I'll just pause the sim right here and switch on my track IR so I have some vision surrounding me. So bear with me, I'll be back in just a second. So welcome back in the helicopter with the engines working, track IR online. As you can see, a lot of time has passed since the end of the first part of this video. That's because, well, I did do a flight and I told a lot about helicopters, but I forgot to press the record button. So I have to do everything over again. But that does help us a little bit, because let me just bring the view back to the controls first. Well, like I said, the cyclic, the anti-torque pedals, and the collective with the throttle. Well, what is quite important when you are flying this airplane, this helicopter, is to know what affects what. There are some special gauges on the instrument panel. Let me just start with that. So let me just freeze the view here for a minute. Here you have the torque indicator, and this is the rotor RPM. Now the rotor RPM is controlled by the throttle. If I increase my throttle right now, you will see that the blades start to increase speed. The RPM of the blades increases. So here we go. And you see the needle moving up. This is only a very small input on my throttle quadrant, so the sensitivity is quite high. So throttle influences the RPM. That's important to know. Now another thing that influences the RPM in a way is the collective. Because the collective, like I said before, it changes the pitch of the rotor blades. And when the pitch of the rotor blades increases to gain more lift, they also create more drag. So if I just add in a little bit of rotor RPM, let's say we put it at about 60, like it is right now. If I start to pull on the collective, as I am doing right now, you will see that the RPM needle starts to decrease again. See that? And that's because of the drag created by the higher pitch angle of the blades. So now when I pull the collective down, it will restore itself back to 60%. So what I have to do in order to maintain a constant RPM is whenever I raise my collective, I have to increase throttle. And whenever I lower my collective, I have to decrease throttle to keep the RPM of the blades at the same percentage. So let's just see if we can get this thing in the air right now. So increase the RPM to approximately 80 or 90%. This is just throttle, and you can see that nothing else is happening when I increase the throttle, only the RPM is moving up. And of course the torque is moving up. That's very important, because the blades, the engine spinning the blades is working harder. It will create more torque on the fuselage, and that torque creates a movement of the fuselage that is counter to the direction of the blades. So if my blades are turning clockwise, then as a result of the torque, my fuselage wants to turn counterclockwise. But here we are, between 80-90% RPM on the blades. So let's now gently increase the collective. We'll see that the RPM is dropping, so increase the throttle again to get it back on the proper RPM. At the same time, increase the collective, and there will be a point where the helicopter will actually start to move. Here we are. And here we are actually starting to fly. Let's see if we can hover above our position right now. Because if I pause this, I think we are off the ground, definitely off the ground. So let's just see if we can hover over the runway. We are moving quite fast now actually. So ooh, 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 ooh. Well, I do think that track IR is quite vital when you are flying in a helicopter, because flying in a helicopter means spatial awareness is very important. Whoa, 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 whoa. I shouldn't be talking and flying at the same time with this helicopter. Let's just gain some altitude. Altitude is safety, because it gives you time to respond. So let's just start flying off. Let's move to the right here and follow that shoreline for a bit. Let's raise the landing gear. Gear is up and off. I think I left the parking brake on. That's a big mistake. Shouldn't do that. But anyway, here we are. We are actually quite high already, or over 1300 feet. So let's decrease the collective and the throttle. Lower the altitude a little bit and then try to maintain level flight for a while. Try to keep the RPM out of the yellow, but we are flying very rapid now, so let's lower the collective, raise the nose, increase collective slightly because we don't want to descend too far, we don't want to hit the ground. See if we can get rid of some of that forward speed without gaining too much altitude. So nose up. So here we are, 600 feet. That's nice. Try to keep it between 600 and 700 feet now. Let's increase the collective slightly. So torque just below 20%, altitude 560. Let's increase the collective because we are descending. But the RPM is just below 90, it's about 86. And the forward speed, well, decreasing now slightly because of the nose angle. About 70 knots, 65. Here we are. But we are at 500 feet and I wanted to be at 600. So let's increase collective and throttle. See that the RPM remains at approximately 86-90% while we are climbing, and the forward speed maintains pretty much constant. This may look rather smooth, but it is, I find this incredibly difficult to keep it like this. This is a lot of fun, but it's very, very intense flying. This doesn't come natural to me at all, so increase the nose again. And that's also one of the reasons why I don't talk as much as I usually do, because this takes up a lot of concentration. Keep climbing. All right, here we are. 700 feet. That's quite nice. Keep that forward speed under control and try to keep it at vertical speed 0, like this. Oh. Constantly with very, very small inputs on the cyclic, so the stick in front of you. Try to maintain that vertical speed at 0. Try to keep your forward speed constant and check that your RPM remains as it is. So not too much touching the collective. Let's make a turn to the right here. Fly back to the coast. And then along the coast back to the airport. quite tiring on my arm. I think I need to set some trim controls on my yoke very soon, because I think a lot is to be gained by assigning trim axis. Oh. Because I'm now constantly pushing and pulling on the cyclic, which is rather tiring. So let's just fly back towards in the direction of the airport. Here we go. Oh, maintain that altitude. So nose slightly up. RPM is getting rather high, so decrease throttle slightly. But keep that nose up. I have a tendency of moving downwards, so let's increase a little bit of collective. So basically, when you are in the air and you want to keep your RPM under control, there are two ways of doing that. If your RPM is too high for your liking, you can either reduce throttle or increase collective. And if it is too low, you can decrease collective or increase throttle. But that in turn will have an effect on the vertical speed of the airplane, especially if you use the collective. So you need to compensate with your cyclic for that again. So you're constantly balancing the four main control inputs for the helicopter, being the cyclic or the stick in front of you, and the anti-torque pedals, trying to keep the helicopter in a straight line, the collective, and the throttle inputs. Basically, if you master to coordinate these four control inputs, then you're a very, very big step closer to flying helicopters, because it is incredibly difficult. It takes up a lot of practice to master that. And if you master it good enough, then you will be able to hover your helicopter, which is actually a basic skill for helicopter pilots. Because from what I read on helisimmer.com, is basically during every takeoff you need to hover. If you move back in for landing, you have to switch from forward flight to hovering. And of course, if you are rescuing people, picking up cargo loads, whatever, you need to hover, be able to hover the helicopter, which is incredibly difficult to do. So let's just see if we can land it safely again. What I will do already is lower the gear before I forget that. So gear is down, locked in 3 green. 650 feet. This is the aerodrome. So let's see if we can lower collective, lower throttle, raise the nose a bit to lose some forward speed and some altitude. Because I'm still quite high, it's 600 feet at this stage. This is nice and controlled descending and reducing speed, just the way I like it. So 80 knots. By the way, the scenery that you're looking at is photo scenery tiles by zonephoto.x-plane.fr with your standard X-Plane 11 autogen houses, trees, whatever. So let's just raise the nose a bit more, lose speed, And make a right turn towards the runway. Let's lower the collective and the throttle. Oof, Christ. That wasn't too good at all. That was quite disastrous actually. So let's just... Oh, where's the parking brake? There it is. And see how that looked like from the outside, which must be horrible. Replay mode. Of course, coming in way too fast. Oof. Oof. That should have been a crash. I don't know why it wasn't actually, because I thought I have the crash option selected in X-plane. But I must say, I'm getting pretty tired of doing this in a good way. It's exhausting because it's completely new. All the coordinating takes a lot of, well, it requires a lot of thinking and, well, reasoning, so to speak, which action you have to take to get the result in the helicopter's behavior that you want. Let's just try it again. So increase the throttle for more RPM, just a short, basically circuit around the airport, just to take off and a landing. Let's just see if we can hover. So right now, RPM is 90%. Now I will bring in the collective and more throttle to keep that RPM needle at 90. Here we are, so collective or cyclic to counter the movement and the anti-torque pedal, of course. Here we go. Oh heck, I forgot to switch off the brake again. Let's do that first. Brakes are off. Counter torque to the left. I think I'm off the ground already. No, we're not. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, this is so terrible. This is so difficult, yet so much fun. Let's... Oh, yeah, here we go. Off the ground now. I think, no, we're not. Here we are. Forward movement, please. Yeah, here we are. And tiny movements, try not to overcompensate like I'm doing right now. Oh, crap, crap, crap. I just want to hover in one place. It's so difficult. Here we are. That's more like it. Let's see. Oh, increase the collective and the throttle. Cyclic forward. Okay, let's just climb out. Nice and easy. Here we are. So gear up. Let's move forward. Steadily cruise away. 300 feet. And climbing. Okay, so let's make a left turn now. We're at 500 feet. Let's lower the collective again. Don't want to climb much further right now. There we are. Finishing this turn. Oh, now raise the nose to make sure that the forward speed isn't increasing too much, because slowing down from a high forward speed into a hover is incredibly difficult. I really don't know how these army pilots do that, who drop like special forces or SWAT teams on top of roofs. They come in with an incredible high speed and then just bring the helicopter into a hover very quickly. And with me struggling with my controls behind my PC, I'm only slightly getting a feeling of how difficult that must be in real life. So kudos to the Army, Navy, Air Force helicopter pilots who master these controls of these helicopters so well that they can do that. Or police helicopter pilots, for all that matters. So gear down. There's the runway, so let's lower the collective and the throttle. Raise the nose. But don't climb. Raise the nose further. Reducing that forward speed, but lowering it in time to prevent... Oh crap, up. Oh, ships. Here we go. Oof. Well, I think I'm getting tired. Well, let's just see what that looked like. Anyway, there's a lot of practice for me in the future with this. But it is a lot of fun, like I've mentioned a couple of times right now. Oh, there goes the gate. Ooh, just clear. Bam, into the gate. Well, it's a good thing we have flight simulators, because if this was real world, we would have done a lot of damage. But anyway, helicopter flying, it's an art. I don't master it yet, but yeah, I think I will do this much more often to see how things progress, because this is a completely new learning curve for me. Like I said, there's a lot of coordination involved with the four main control inputs being cyclic, anti-torque, collective, and throttle. And well, I think it's just like learning to ride a bike. You have to do it a lot to get a feel for it, to basically intuitive do the right things. I'm not at that stage for a long shot. Well, I hope you liked the video. Once again, I'm not a professional pilot, let alone a helicopter pilot. Absolutely not. If you saw me struggling and you do have a lot of experience flying helicopters either in real life or in sims and you have tips, tricks or whatsoever, please leave them in the comment section below so I and also the other viewers are capable of learning something from this. If you saw me and you thought, well, that's nice to give it a try with the helicopters, make sure to read the how to fly helicopters articles on helisimmer.com. They have a set of basic tutorials, very short, very clear articles about the different phases of flight, especially the helicopter controls and how the controls interact with each other. I think these articles are a must read if you are completely new to helicopter flying and you want to give it a go. This gives you a lot of insight in how the helicopter responds to control inputs and why it responds in that way, which is quite important to know, I think. So anyway, uh, thank you for watching. Hope to see you next time on another adventure, maybe even with a helicopter. But we'll look into that. Have fun. See you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.